Recently, I saw the most pitiful comment on one of my YouTube shorts. It was someone saying, I wish I could tell the difference. And it was just a video of me playing a bunch of chords, very different chords. And it made me kind of sad because I realized that if you don't have any level of training, it might actually be quite difficult to tell the difference between different sounds in music. This spurred me to make a practical guide on how to listen and develop that discernment, that ability to tell the difference. We're going to go through different tiers of listening and what you can do right now to increase your ability to tell the difference, which will, in my opinion, increase your enjoyment of music. As I started working on this, it just started ballooning up in complexity. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to hit up just 3 major concepts, and then we can get into some nitty-gritty if you're still with me, and then summarize. First of all, I'm Robert Monroe. I'm a professional musician. This is my YouTube channel where I do silly things, and then I make some videos that hopefully give you some real tools and resources to get better at music. Most of my videos tend to target that intermediate range. This is a video that really is going to be for the absolute beginner. If you know absolutely nothing about music, this video is perfect for you. The first concept I want to talk about is music mirroring the hero's journey. Now, if we think about movies, if we think about novels, if we think about the story that you told your friend today, all good storytelling, all good narrative is going to follow this path of a hero's journey. What do I mean by that? We're going to start from a place of calm, of resolution, of everything being okay. This is going to be, all's fine in the village. Oh, we're having a good time. We do a little song and dance, right? Think of every Disney movie. Then something bad happens. Darth Vader shows up. The emperor, whatever, bad guy, right? And then everything goes crappy. It gets worse. It gets worse. Our hero has to grow, has to become better at something. And then finally, confrontation, conflict, and then resolution. Well, this is done at a very small scale in music, like literally one note to the next. Also done at a very large scale. It can be done to the scale that it actually covers an entire artist's life. That's how big of a scale this can actually be done to. Here's the second concept: terms and definitions. If you know names for things, they will stick in your head easier, and you will be able to identify them easier, and you will be able to communicate easier. If you love terms and definitions, then you know what I'm talking about. If you don't and you hate memorization, well, there's still a point to this, so please stick with me. It's going to help you. Don't worry about it. Our third concept is, even though there are quite a few freaks such as myself that want to dedicate their entire life to studying all of music's weird intricacies and crazinesses, and want there to be an objective language, something that if I mention a word, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The truth is, there's nothing wrong with enjoying music at a very subjective level. What do I mean by that? Well, you might be listening to a certain sound and be like, oh, I think of the color blue, and I have this emotion come with this, and I always think about this. Well, that might only work for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. So if analyzing music to death, which is something I really enjoy, is helpful to you, go by all means do that. If just listening and being like, this feels good, knock yourself out. There's nothing wrong with being subjective with the way you enjoy music. Now, with that out of the way, I want to get into the real meat and potatoes of this video. So what is our goal? Our goal is to increase our ability to identify musical concepts and therefore enjoy music more. We're going to define some terms. We're going to talk through different levels of identification because this stuff just ratchets up in difficulty. And then we're going to just summarize some general trends of what is helpful. There's one big disclaimer that I want to throw out there, which is there's a very small portion of the population that is actually tone deaf. What I literally mean by that is they can't hear the difference between any pitches. Studies have shown it between 2 to 5%. Even if you feel like this is you, I would highly encourage you to do your best and follow along and see if you can identify different pitch levels, because I think for most people who think they're tone deaf, it's actually they've never really tried or never had the help and the patience from someone else to guide them through. And so I think no matter what level you're at, you can always increase your ability. Let's define some terms before we begin to help. Pitch. A pitch is a distinct sound determined by its frequency. Higher. Higher is literally what it sounds like, a higher pitch. So if we say higher, we mean a higher frequency. It's going to be perceived as being higher. And lower, exact same thing. Pitch, perceived lower. Interval, a measured distance between pitches. So a lot of times we'll be referring to things like seconds, thirds, fourths. And what we mean by that is going from da-da or da-dee. Those are going to be different sizes. And you can go from really, really small da-dee to really big da-dum. Now let's talk harmony. 2 or more notes at the same time and produce a color. This a lot of times is interchanged with the word chord. They don't mean exactly the same thing. Harmony is more of an overarching term, and chord is more of a specific term for a specific set of notes, but you get the idea. Dissonance, a sound that makes us uncomfortable, generally something more complicated in its mathematic relationship. Let me unpack that for a second. When we create harmony, when we create basically intervals and distances in music, they all have a mathematical relationship to each other, a ratio, if you will. The simplest is if you take a string and you divide it directly in half, you produce a frequency that is twice as high as the frequency that you get from just, strumming the string by itself. That creates the perception of an octave, which literally sounds like the same thing, but up one whole octave, one set of notes, if you will. That perception is a 1-to-2 relationship, right? We're cutting it right in half. Very, very simple. But instead, if you do something much more complicated, divide the string in a really weird way where you get a really uncomfortable, crazy ratio, that tends to sound more dissonant to our ears. Consonance is kind of the opposite of that. It's a sound that is comforting in general and is simpler most of the time in that mathematical ratio. A octave is a great example of that. That is a very consonant interval. Let's start with these levels. The 0 level, the baseline, do this at the beginning. You can do this even if you are tone deaf, is what instruments do you hear? I would love for you guys to get familiar, if you haven't already, with the names of the different types of instruments and even the families of instruments. In general, we divide instruments into groups of percussion instruments, string instruments, wind instruments, and then you have all these subcategories in there. For example, my favorite instruments are the keyboard instruments. You've got organ, you've got piano, you've got harpsichord, things like that. You have guitars, you have percussion with things such as drum set. You have wind instruments, which my wife plays, trombone, trumpet. Those are the brass instruments. And then you have the woodwinds like clarinet. All of this stuff kind of fills in this big knowledge area, and you go, what does that help me if I'm trying to listen and enjoy music and not play? Well, the ability to be able to hear the difference between a trumpet and a clarinet can really give you a lot of insights into not only the sounds you're hearing, but also the emotions that are supposed to be perceived. All of these things have historical traditions of what they are supposed to make us feel like. And so having even that 0 level knowledge of what instruments are being played can help you a ton. Now let's get into what I would classify the first level of music listening appreciation, and that is higher or lower. That's it. And for most of you, this is going to sound like a joke, like this is not even a thing. But if you are new and this is a new concept, this is great. I want you to actually be listening and go, okay, do I hear this? And it sounds like something really low, like an elephant would make. Or is it going to sound really high and sound like kind of a bird song? That difference right there is going to give you so much. You can tell so much of the drama of music knowing whether the pitch is going up or going down. Also, the overarching pitches. If you've got a bunch of instruments playing, are they all playing really high? Are they all playing really low? Are they playing in the middle? This can be a huge, huge unlock for listening to music. The second level is going to be the distance between notes. This is where you start to really blow it all open and start to really get in to music theory and ear training. And what I mean by that is you can start measuring what those distances are. And at the beginning, this can just be, oh, is this a really big difference between things? You know, like I was talking about an octave before, da-dee. Or you can talk smaller at distances, right? Da-dee, half steps. But in reality, once you get really good at this, you can actually start to identify every single interval, which there are 12 in an octave. And that gives you this level of granularity that can make you very, very good at telling what's happening in music. If that sounds off-putting, don't worry about it. That's okay. Just hold on. The third level, which again, you could argue these are almost on the same plane, but we're just going to keep using this idea of levels, is going to be how it makes you feel. The dissonance versus the consonance. And this is really closely related to the second level because how music makes you feel and the emotional content from music comes with a great amount from the distances between the notes. And by hearing whether an interval is dissonant or consonant, it can really greatly help you narrow down what interval it is and also narrow down how you're supposed to feel about it. And again, this gets into something tricky. Is the feelings of music something that comes from the composer, the person who wrote it, or from the listener? I would argue that both of those ideas is kind of like doing a nature-nurture debate. It's kind of just throwing something out there to be argumentative and to try to upset people. Because in reality, if you think about it for even 2 seconds, you realize it's more complicated than that, and it's a bit of both. Let's talk about the fourth level and beyond. This is where formal music education and ear training really truly begin. This is where you start to develop a whole system of music theory. And I have a video idea that I want to do soon talking about why music theory exists and what it really is and what it's there for. But if you have comments about any of these specific things, please leave them below, and I'd love to get into that and help you out. But before we end the video, I want to talk about how we actually apply these terms and concepts to you right now, to your listening, so you can start to develop this ability to kind of piece through things and pick things out. Well, I would argue you should start where you're comfortable. If you hear music and sounds and immediately feel something, work backwards into more definable terms. So like if you're like, oh, this feels like water. Oh, I think of a bird when I hear this. Then you can work backwards and go, oh, the pitches are higher. Maybe everything flows together. Nothing's that dissonant, that problematic to our ears, and maybe it's more consonant. All of those things can help you out. So if you start from feelings, there's nothing wrong with that. But some of us actually are the opposite. Our hearts are dead inside, and we feel nothing when we listen to music. And what we're going to need is a little bit of prompting from the actual scientific mathematical relationships and ratios between the notes and the sounds. And so we can use these concepts of higher and lower in historical practice, then fill in what we're supposed to feel. And then once we hit that, it's like, oh, and our hearts wake up and we're like, wow, this is really beautiful. Be patient with yourself and view getting it wrong. Like, you go, oh, I think it's going higher here. And actually it's going lower. View that as a positive, because often the best way to learn is from our mistakes. And you want to constantly test your ears. Are these higher or lower pitches? Are they close together or are they far apart? Does it sound consonant and safe to me or dissonant and a little scary? The best part about this is, going back to what I talked about a long time ago, there is a high degree of subjectivity in music and music listening. By definition, if it makes sense to you and is internally consistent, you're going to be heading in the right direction. I would argue you're still better off trying to apply those internal terms to something a little more objective that will help you communicate with others and help to get you a little more of a definitive sense of what you're listening to. But no matter what, I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you a place to at least start if you're that person with no access point, no ability to tell what's going on in music. And then we can go from there and we can explore this amazing world. I'm Robert Monroe. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you later. Peace.